Usually, if someone is the victim of abuse, they do not want their abuser to be given more power, more money, and better terms of employment. What SHAC does is actively recruit residents who are concerned about the abusive behaviour of landlords and frontline staff members and rechannel that energy into operating as a mouthpiece for exactly the people who've been abusing them. Whether this is a deliberate attempt to harm customers or not is hard to say for certain. Let's consider some of the harms that frontline staff commit using a few key words. Inspection fraud, faking safety inspections and records. Complaint drift, altering complaint topics to trivial claims. Decoy breaches, manufacturing minor guideline breaches to avoid responsibility. Victim scapegoating, blaming a victim's lifestyle. Exhausting tenants by weaponizing bollocks questioning. Report omissions, removing key correspondence and evidence. Procedure traps, adhering to excessive and confusing rules. Trivial payments, using small payments to close serious files. Integrity sacrifice, compromising personal ethics and conscience. And blocking information and access, or hostile hoarding. All of the inquiries and coroner's reports and major cases have involved frontline staff engaging in abusive action. On the surface, the Social Housing Action Campaign might appear as the undisputed champions for tenants. They organise protests, they get media attention, they give a voice to the voiceless. But we have to ask a very difficult and uncomfortable question. What if the very strategy of tenants' biggest champion is helping the corrupt system to survive? SHAC's main claim is that the problem with social housing is greed, and their main villain is the fat cat CEO, earning a huge salary while tenants suffer. Their solution is therefore simple: cap the salaries, end the profiteering, and demand more funding. This might be an emotionally satisfying story for some, because it presents a simple good versus evil battle. As we've discussed, the system's favourite scapegoat is the CEO. It allows everyone to direct their anger at a single, distant, and easily hateable target. But why would a tenant campaign focus group so relentlessly on this one simple story when we know the reality is so much deeper? The answer lies in who SHAC is. SHAC is supported by and inextricably linked to the Unite Union. And who do those unions represent? They represent workers. Now you have to ask the next crucial question. Who are the frontline workers in the social housing industry? Well, they're the housing officers and the repair coordinators, and they're also the surveyors and inspectors. These are the same functionaries and gatekeepers whose job it is to make the customer the scapegoat. They're the people on the ground who, as the Ombudsman's own report confirms, have a systematic history of writing fraudulent reports, blaming tenant lifestyles, and creating the fictitious ledger or reports that operate as a stitch-up for customers who complain. This is the profound, tragic and unresolvable conflict of interest at SHAC. So can an organisation that claims to fight for tenants also be in a deep alliance with the union that represents the same people carrying out the day-to-day abuse? Well, in my opinion, no, it can't. What is the result of SHAC trying to bring these two groups together? Well, first, it enforces the frontline staff taboo. So SHAC is structurally incapable of launching a campaign that says the problem is the systematic fraudulent record keeping being carried out by frontline surveyors, which is in fact the truth. To do so would be to declare war on the very union members they're allied with, the hard-working frontline staff that are protected. This means the primary crime, the fake records, can never be the primary target for SHAC. It also means that the focus is always on the wrong motive. By focusing on greed, SHAC is forced to ignore the real terrifying motive, the black hole of remediation that the industry does not want to face. They have to pretend the problem is a simple matter of profit, because to admit that it's a systematic crisis of liability would be to admit that the entire system, including the frontline workers and their jobs, are at risk and that they're all engaged in a massive coordinated cover-up. Their analysis has to stop at the boardroom door. It also means that their solutions are just more of the same, because you can't address the foundational lie about the black hole. Their solution is then always focused on superficial things like funding for a system that is fundamentally corrupt. That's not going to fix it. We do not want to give loads and loads of extra money to an industry engaged in fraud and covering up safety breaches. They're demanding a new coat of paint for a house that's rotten to its foundations. So, at least I have one viewer, this very sweet cat. Hello. Aww. So, should we be hard on SHAC? Should we blame SHAC? Well, I don't really know. What I do know is that its members are actively engaging with real customers on the forums and essentially trying to bully them and giving them the same arguments as the customers would experience if they were talking to your generally abusive staff member at a housing association or council. So it's got that problem and it's not resolving it anytime soon as far as I can see. If SHAC is a protest group or a watchdog, it's incapable of biting the hand that carries out the abuse, which means that basically it has to carry on being nice to abusive staff members, which I think that you and I should have absolutely no intention of doing. At its worst, SHAC is bringing people, and it does actively recruit people from forums, from X, etc., into its ranks, and then channeling their anger into anger about CEOs and fat cats who the customer has never met and probably couldn't care less about. If we want real change, we have to look at the systematic abuse across the industry, and that means attacking frontline staff workers for what they do wrong, just as we attack CEOs, and definitely not trying to get more pay and better conditions for a bunch of people who, in many cases, might well be better off in prison. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.